Good evening, and welcome to Utah Valley University, the newest university in the state of Utah and the premier engaged university in the nation. I'm Liz Hitch, interim president. We are pleased to host this debate on our campus tonight. It's fitting that a debate between political candidates would occur on a university campus where open discussion of various ideas and opinions are valued. We are particularly pleased that we're able to televise this tonight because Utah Valley is a community-engaged university seeking to serve the citizens of our region. This debate features the three contenders for the Utah 3rd Congressional seat, Benyon Spencer, Jason Chaffetz, and Jim Norlander. We would like to thank the many people who have worked to make this debate possible before we begin. Our sponsors include the Daily Herald, whose president and publisher, Rana Rolfe, is here tonight, the Center for the Study of Ethics at Utah Valley University, which includes Elaine Engelhardt and many of her staff people, the UVU Student Association, and the UVU President's Office. I would also like to recognize our broadcast department at UVU, Will McKinnon and his crew, who are televising this debate tonight live on UVU television. Finally, I'd like to thank our community members who are here tonight or watching the debate live. We appreciate your support of the democratic process and Utah Valley University. We encourage you to vote on November 4th. And now, Joseph Watkins, Student Body President at UVU, will now introduce the candidates. Joseph?
Thank you so much, President Hitch. It's an honor for me to represent the students at Utah Valley University and introduce the candidates. First up, we have Benyon Spencer. Benyon Spencer grew up in Layton, Utah. He received his bachelor's degree in broadcasting communications from Weber State University. His master's degree he received from Utah State University. Benyon served at LDS Mission in England and in Wales. For the past 25 years, he's been working in journalism as a broadcast reporter and a news director, and the general managers at stations in Texas and in Utah. He also served as the advisor for the Riverton Youth Council. In 2007, he helped his longtime friend and associate, Dick Norris, establish the Dick Norris Center for Mass Communications and Journalism at Dixie State College in St. George. Benyon and his wife, Melinda, live in Riverton, Utah. They have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Our next candidate is Jason Chaffetz. Jason Chaffetz is the incumbent congressman running for Congressman Chris Cannon. Our next candidate, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, the thing's going like this. Nominated. Jason moved to Utah in the mid-1980s after being recruited by Lavelle Edwards to be a place kicker for the BYU football team. After a successful football career and getting his degree in communication, he married his wife, Julie, and they spent the next 16 years in the local business community here in Utah. Jason worked for 2 years as Governor John Huntsman Jr.'s first campaign manager, and then as his chief of staff in 2005. He rejoined the private sector, managing his own company, Maxterra Utah, a corporation communications and marketing firm. Jason and his wife have been married for 17 years and have 3 children, Max, Ellis, and Kate. Our final candidate, Jim Norlander. Jim Norlander was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and spent his teenage years growing up in California. He attended high school in Pomona, California, where he met his future wife, Liz. He joined the United States Marine Corps in 1971. Jim spent most of his military career at Camp, let me see if I get this right, Lejeune, Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. He was honorably discharged in 1975 after his service. Him and his family, including 2 young daughters, moved to Provo, Utah. Jim attended Utah Valley Technical College, now UVU, where he studied and graduated in building construction. He worked in several areas of the trades before moving his family to Sanpete County, Utah. There he started a roofing contracting business, which he continues to run today. Jim and Lisa have raised 11 children, 6 sons, 5 daughters, and have 20 grandchildren. Randy Wright, the managing editor of the Daily Herald, and Jim Tyne, opinion editors, will be our moderators at this debate. Randy Wright is a native of Provo. He's had a long newspaper career and has been executive editor of the Daily Herald for 6 years. Jim Tyne has just finished his first year as opinion editors for the Daily Herald. We now turn the time over to the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We'll now turn directly to the discussion at hand, but first let's review a couple of little details. Each candidate will be given up to 90 seconds to respond to questions, except for a few that might require just a short answer. When you see this stop sign right over here our assistant has, that sign will go up when you have about 15 seconds left, and we would ask you to please wrap up promptly when you see the sign to be fair to the other candidates and keep us on schedule. So let's plunge right in. We want to start off this evening with the topic that is highest on the minds of Americans right now, the financial turmoil on Wall Street and in foreign markets. We'll start with Mr. Chaffetz, and then second, Mr. Norlander, and then followed by Mr. Spencer. As you know, the House of Representatives this week rejected a $700 billion bailout plan. Perhaps the most interesting thing is the extent that the vote crossed party lines. 133 Republicans were joined by 95 Democrats in voting no. Utah's Republicans were split. Rob Bishop voted no. Chris Cannon voted yes. The Democrat, Jim Matheson, voted no. How would you have voted on Monday, and what is the right way to solve this crisis?
Well, thank you. And first, let me thank UVU for hosting us here, the Daily Herald, and the great work in putting this on. I also want to recognize my wife, Julie, and son, Max, who are here, and foundation of my life, and grateful that they're here with us. I, too, would have joined Congressman Matheson and Congressman Bishop in voting no against this bill. We need a workout, not a bailout. It is not the role of the federal government to reach into each and every one of our pockets and spend hundreds of billions of dollars to just bail out what's happening on Wall Street. So again, I would reiterate that we need a workout, not a bailout. The way to solve our nation's ills are not to just go further into debt. One of the main problems that we're having in this country is we don't understand the proper role of government, we don't institute that, and that the fundamental problem that we have is we can no longer continue just going into debt by putting everything on the credit card. There are a number of things that we have to do to help change this problem. Now, social engineering, in large part, got us in this problem. But I don't think more social engineering in the form of socialism is the way to get us out of this problem. This is not a deregulated industry, quite the contrary. And I think we do have to look at the FDIC and other institutions that were there to help try to protect and give exposure to what's supposed to happen. I would love to recommend to the President of the United States that we fire Secretary Paulson. There's a host of other things that we do. But I'm out of time.
Yep, thank you very much. Mr. Norlander.
There's nothing worse than trying to solve a problem if you don't understand the nature of the problem. I believe, as the Founding Fathers did, that our Constitution is divinely inspired, written by the finger of Providence. What the government continues to do is give the American people 5 bad choices, and you get to make the best bad choice. They never tell you the one way to be right. What our Congress is about to do on both sides of the fence is they're about to adopt the 5th plank of the Communist Manifesto. But they haven't told you that, have they? If you believe, and I imagine the vast majority of this audience here believes as I do and the Founding Fathers, if our Constitution was written by the finger of Providence, it therefore must be based upon eternal principles, gospel principles. And a careful understanding of those principles, we know that debt is unreasonable in a nation like this. What they're going to do, the best thing that we could do is return. This would be the best time right now to fix it. To go back to the original blueprint of the Founding Fathers, whatever it takes. I'm reminded what the Founding Fathers did. They went back to Philadelphia to amend the Articles of Confederation, and they came out with the Constitution of the United States of America. We need to go back to that blueprint, whatever it takes. If it takes 3 months, 4 months, or 5 months, we need to be there. That would be my remedy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Spencer.
I would have voted no, but I probably would support the Senate version that's being debated tonight. I'd have to see the final version. We have to do something. 62 million Americans have money in 401ks that are attached to Wall Street. Last Monday, if you're one of those Americans, for every $10,000 you have in a retirement program, you lost $700. Wall Street is bleeding into Main Street right now. A few greedy executives have destroyed a system of capitalism that is keeping Main Street from functioning. What it comes down to is the fact that we have to do something, and we just cannot let this go unattended. Now, that being said, the relief package needs to accomplish two things. It needs to develop a price discovery, which would be a real value of some of the mortgages that are going default, and also it needs to create market liquidity. We have people today in this valley that have not been able to get a car loan that have credit scores of 650. So everything is coming to a stop, and these have multiplying economic impacts. And so we have to do something. The Senate version is not as extreme as the House version, but something has to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question from my colleague, Jim Tynan.
Actually, as we understand it, the Senate bill, the Senate is considering its own bailout bill, but according to reports, it's laden with $150 billion of extra spending. And how would the House respond? We'll start with Mr. Norlander. Understanding we don't have the many months the founders had, that at least some people think we have to react right now. How should the House respond, assuming it gets the Senate bill? And what specifically should it do from there?
Well, we do have time. You're working on a false premise. That's what we do have. We have time. In order to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we have to take time. We have to make sacrifices now. When I graduated from high school, my base entry wage was $6.87 an hour. If we double that, 40 years later, the base entry wage is $15 an hour. And yet, when I graduated from high school, you could buy any car on the lot for $2,500. You could buy a house for $10,000. Gas was 23 cents a gallon. Now houses are $250,000. A car is $20,000. The base entry wage is $15,000, and they'll tell you there's nothing wrong with the money. We have got to go back to the original blueprint of the Founding Fathers. We do have time, and we must take time. There is no other alternative right now. We will destroy this nation if we do not return back to the blueprint. That's where we're headed.
Thank you. Mr. Spencer gets...
Well,
Mr. Spencer,
yes,
your response.
Part of the $150 billion extra dollars, I believe, is for relief for taxpayers. I would not support that. The Senate version that was started developing this morning specifically addressed mortgages, taking them off the books of banks, allowing the banks to be able to lend money again, putting those mortgages in a situation where they could appreciate in value, so when the economy strengthened, we could get the taxpayers' money back to them. The other version that I liked was there would be no golden parachutes for the Wall Street executives that got us into this problem. I think that would be unconscionable, and I think there ought to be indictments. 2 weeks ago, the CEO of Washington Mutual sent out a letter to all of his shareholders saying everything's fine. Well, that's disingenuous, especially to the people's money. You know, I think, and I respect everything Jim is saying, and I understand everything that Jason is saying, but you know what? This is like you just got in a car wreck, okay, and the officer came up and said, we think the person that plowed into you was drunk, and your family's laying there injured. You want to take them to the hospital, and you want to get them fixed. Then you deal with the other. So how we got here, you know, we have to deal with that, but we have to make sure it never happens again. But right now, our economy is falling apart.
Thank you very much.
We're going to get him. We're going to get him to the hospital. We're not going to keep feeding him alcohol. You said you were in favor of the House version of the bill before they voted on it. Now you're saying opposed to it. Look, we have to get to the core root of this problem. Let me run through real quickly some things that I think are just wrong. One is, I have made a pledge in this campaign. I will not ask for an appropriations earmark until there's openness and transparency. The Senate bill they're voting on tonight has things such as wooden arrows designed for use by children's, auto racing tracks, wool research. This is the kind of ridiculous process that's going on in Washington, D.C. You send me back to Washington, D.C., I will help fix these problems. That's why I took the pledge. That's why I am committed to making sure that we reform the process of government. Instead of dealing with the core root problem and dealing with the situation, we have games being played that I don't think the American people want to stand for anymore. A couple of things I want to run through. Number one, transition of Freddie and Fannie to truly private companies. Let's get out of the business. The public should not be in the business of offering mortgages. Let's get rid of the Community Reinvestment Act. We tried to socially engineer and put people into homes that had no cause for being in those homes. They couldn't afford it, and we oversold it, and we need to get rid of that Community Reinvestment Act. If you're going to help solve the problem, let's have tax reform. I'm in favor of removing the capital gains tax and reducing the corporate tax. That's how you get an infusion. That's how you have capital formation in the market, not the government coming in and throwing hundreds of billions of dollars at it. We need to look at Sarbanes-Oxley, Section 404. On average, it costs a public company that we have many of right here in our own valley, $3.8 million just to administer that one specific rule. And we need to have a serious discussion about cutting the size of government. There's been no discussion on both sides of the aisle from our presidential candidates about cutting the size of government.
Thank you.
Thank you. We turn now to the 3x5 cards. We asked members of our audience to write down questions that we could ask the candidates. Here's one I thought was interesting, somewhat related to the economic question. Somewhat. The national debt has soared to a staggering $11 trillion. That's $36,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. 300 million people. Specifically, where should the country get the money to retire this debt? And we'll start with Mr. Spencer, please.
Well, the last 8 years has been a disaster because, we haven't really had a true economy that has been functioning. We've had this laissez-faire economy, this trickle-down market system, while we're borrowing money from China to fight a war, and we're giving tax breaks to everybody that makes over $200,000. This is like a collision waiting to happen. The best way to get the money is to reduce government spending. I agree with my opponent here. I found some 400 programs that are being funded by the federal government that are being duplicated by local and state governments. That's ridiculous, and we have to go back to the old pay-as-you-go. I mean, one of the things that Congressman Jim Matheson has been pushing really hard, and that is we don't sponsor anything unless we have money to pay for it. We should not pass legislation unless there are funds there to pay for it. Cut government spending, get rid of programs we don't need anymore, pay as you go, and quit borrowing money from foreign countries to fight wars.
Thank you.
Mr. Chavitz.
We do not have a revenue problem in this country. We have a spending problem in this country. 12 years ago, our federal budget was $1.5 trillion. Today, it's $3.1 trillion. And now we just raised the debt ceiling to some $11 trillion that I'm going to have to pay for, you're going to have to pay for, your kids and grandkids are going to have to pay for. We have got to have a serious discussion about how to cut the role of government and cut the expenditures by the federal government. Let me list off a number of things. I follow Mitt Romney's lead when he said, let's cut non-defense discretionary spending to inflation minus 1%. You do that one move alone, just that one move, you save $300 billion on just that one move. We need to look at across-the-board cuts. Here we did this in the state of Utah. We have a constitutional provision that required the state to cut the budget, and they went in and did the right thing. It's not fun, it's painful, but it's the right thing to do. I told you already about my feelings about earmarks because I think they're corruptive to the process. Unto themselves, they're not appropriations, but they are destroying the process of good government. The Department of Education, I want to repeal No Child Left Behind. There should not even be a federal Department of Education in this country. I'm out of time, but I got a long list.
Thank you.
The Government Accounting Office 4 years ago stated that in order to get out of the problem that we are in now, we would have to cut government spending by 60% or increase taxes by 75%. I believe I heard Alan Greenspan say today there is no way to get out of the problem that we're in. The real debt, ladies and gentlemen, is not 10 or 11 trillion. The real debt facing America is $150 trillion, not just the national debt, but in unfunded mandates that we have for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and so on. We need to revamp the tax system that we now have. I propose a 1% transaction tax, removing all other forms of taxation, getting rid of the Federal Reserve, going back to a constitutional form of government. I know you don't like that word constitutional, but a transaction tax would generate enough money to pay off the national debt in 3 or 4 years. It could provide enough funding to keep the promises of Social Security and actually be able to phase out the social welfare state over a 15-year period. That's what can be done, a transaction tax. That's how you do it.
Thank you. Let's stick with the cards. One member of our audience asks, what realistic steps do you propose to deal with 12 million or more illegal immigrants? We'll start with Mr. Chaffetz.
It starts number one with fixing legal immigration. I don't care how wide and how tall your fence is. Until we fix legal immigration in this country, we will continue to have this problem. And that means everything from visas to people who want to come here and be citizens of this country. At the same time, I want to lock down the border. I want to get rid of the rewards and incentives to be here illegally. I want to give businesses the tools that they need so that they can hire legally without them having to be their own immigration officers. There are good creative ways that we can help solve this problem. It won't happen overnight, and if it was easy, I'm sure it would have been done a long time ago. I also want to make sure, though, that we are enforcing the current law in this country. We have some 600,000 fugitive aliens. These are people that are here illegally and committed a crime. Went before a federal judge, the judge ordered them to leave the country, and they did not. 600,000 of those people. So I've offered a number of suggestions on how to detain those people. In California, just a couple of days ago, they saw 1,100 people detained. We have got to make sure that we're humane, but that we're just. That there is no pathway to citizenship for being here illegally. None. You should not be rewarded for illegal behavior. And so it's a balanced approach of being humane, but also tough and making sure that we enforce the rule of law.
Thank you. Mr. Norlander, your response.
Since 9/11, over 60,000 Americans have been killed in this country by illegal immigration. To those that are promoting the global community, that is just considered collateral damage. Those that are promoting the global community recognize that if they can leave the borders open for a few more years, it'll be enough to tip the scale. What I propose is the Liberty Card. Every illegal, regardless of why they're here, from whatever nation they may be from, has to get a Liberty Card within 6 months. They're documented. Once you have that Liberty Card, you have up to 4 years to stay in America to liquidate your assets or whatever other properties that you may have. If you get caught without your Liberty Card, we confiscate all your property, and it's automatic deportation to the country of which you came from. Once you're documented and you come back over the border and you're caught, it's an automatic 7 years in the federal penitentiary. It's a very humane process. You can stay here, you can work, you have up to 4 years to get your affairs in order, but after 4 years you have to go. I would also suggest that we militarize the borders to stop the fluctuation of illegal immigration. That would also help fight the war on drugs. This has to be done if we're to ensure the blessings and secure the culture of liberty in this nation.
We're not going to deport our way out of this problem. We must be tough, practical, and smart. We have the right to secure our borders. We have the right to know who's in this country. What we need to do, though, is we need to consider that it's not a good situation for the people that are here that are undocumented workers. 2 weeks ago, I heard a report in the Salt Lake Valley of 10 individual businesses that are charging undocumented workers $100 a week to cash their paychecks. We have to secure our borders, but a guest worker program is a way to not only screen people, but it also allows people to start paying into the system. And I think that there's some things that we need to look at. On the other side of the immigration, 2/3 of the students that graduate in 2010 from our higher universities in the degrees of engineering and science are students that are in this country on a guest worker on a student visa. And they're not going to wait around for 5 years to become citizenship. In fact, the largest oil refinery in India is being built by a group of MIT students that could not get citizenship after they graduated from MIT, so they just took their blueprints and went home. But we can secure our borders. We can create a pathway to citizenship that is more streamlined. They should not have to wait years and years. Do you know that the average person that applies for citizenship, it can be up to 500 days before their application is even reviewed? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is a question that was asked at a debate among 3rd District candidates in the past. We'll start with Mr. Norlander, go on to Mr. Spencer, and then Mr. Chaffetz. And this question is, in business or in your personal life, have you ever employed an illegal alien?
Have I ever employed? I've hired, but I've never employed. I was working for, I have to tell you the truth. I was doing a job last year, and the individual that I was working for and working through and under him, we hired an illegal, yes. I didn't know that, and once the job was finished, I told the gentleman he can't work for me anymore. He was illegal. I can't do it. I just had to tell you the truth. That happened to me. I don't know what else I could do. What can you do? There's no database I can go to. They show you the papers. They tell you they're here. I don't know how to stop the problem without some type of database. That's why I support the Liberty Card, where they're documented. They have up to 4 years to get their affairs in order and then go back to the country of origin in which they come from. There is no way any employer now can verify who's legal and who's not legal. Once I found out that he was illegal, I've never hired him back. That's the best that I can do. Ironically, it was the first time and the only time that I have ever hired an illegal or somebody from a foreign nation. In particular, this man was from Guatemala. He said he's been here for 20 years, and he got his wife. His wife actually walked across the border from New Mexico, I understand. And he told me the whole thing, and he got the coyotes to bring his cousin over. He revealed the whole secret combination after I found out he was illegal. But yes, I have employed, but I've never hired.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Spencer.
No, and it's a legitimate question because in 2004, only 3 people across the entire country were fined for hiring people that were undocumented workers. But in 2005, the Department of Social Security Administration released a report that said because of phony Social Security cards that undocumented workers have used to get jobs, in 2005 there was $520 billion sitting into accounts that's still there from undocumented workers who've used phony identification to work.
Thank you.
No.
Mr. Chaffetz.
No, not knowingly. I've had 2 gentlemen approach to want to work when asked to produce documentation. They never came up with it, and they never came back to work. So, no, not knowingly.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Mr. Spencer, but we'd like to hear from everyone on this. The questioner says, your proposal for relief at the pump says nothing about drilling for more domestic oil. Why not drill offshore and in Alaska now?
Drill everywhere, I say. I think we have to make sure that the oil stays in the United States, or part of it. And we can't say, well, because it goes on the open market, and that's part of our free trade policy. It's not free if we subsidize the oil companies. So what do we benefit from this? China's putting 1,500 cars a day on the road. By the time we hit oil in ANWR, China will have more cars than we have. So we've gained nothing. But I think drilling, we have to have the incentive that we have a comprehensive energy policy so that we're not going to drill our way out of this problem. But I guarantee you, you talk to the oil executives, and every drop you pull out of ANWR is going to go on the open market, and this country may not even see a drop.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chaffetz.
Even I wouldn't say drill everywhere. Look, we ought to be extracting the resources that are on our own backyard. We ought to be drilling in ANWR. We ought to be off the continental shelf. Fundamentally, what has to happen is the role of government has got to get out of the way and let the private markets attack these. We are overregulated and overtaxed. This is quite a change from your earlier position where you were very critical of my going up to ANWR. Drilling in ANWR is very responsible. It can be done economically. It can be done very eco-friendly. I want to pursue every other piece or every other part of energy out there, but it is not the role of government to pick winners and losers like we did with ethanol. I went down and visited the Moroni Feed Company. They're going to have to lay off hundreds of people. Why? Because of high cost of fuel and the high cost of feed. Now, we have to pursue all avenues, but that does not mean it's the federal government that should be subsidizing and putting money into pursuing all of these. I'm pro-nuclear. You want to have something clean for the environment, we need to pursue nuclear power. NEPA has fundamentally got to be changed. What is wrong in this country? What is wrong in our state when it takes $700 million to build a 14-mile stretch of freeway we call Legacy Highway? We have our priorities screwed up. And it starts with fighting those radical environmentalists and loosening up the regulations so we can do what needs to be done in this country, and that means accelerating the appeals process and having tort reform to tackle this energy issue.
Ladies and gentlemen, to suggest that the price of oil is what's costing the American people so much in their products now is like saying that I washed down the sidewalk last night and that's what caused it to rain. The reason the price of oil is so high right now is not because there's a shortage of oil. There is plenty of oil. The reason the cost of oil is so high is because of the Federal Reserve, their money system, fractional banking they keep printing the money. Since 9/11, those printing presses have been going around the clock just pumping out the money. That is what has caused the problems that we have today. It has to go back to the money system. Now, there are ways to, one of the reasons that we have what we can do. Years ago, Fordson Tractor Company had a prototype of a diesel tractor that got 200 miles per gallon on a gallon of diesel. They didn't follow through with that because at that time, in the early 1950s, energy was so cheap. We've done the same thing in the roofing business for years. You can vaporize diesel and use it in your tar kettles. It would work in cars. All you have to do is vaporize the fuel. It expands the fuel and it gives you twice as much. I agree with Jason. We need to go nuclear, but the government has got to get out of the way. We have got to drill. We have to drill now. And that is the problem. We need to go nuclear. We need to become self-reliant and quit depending on foreign oil. He's right.
For our next question, we'll start with Mr. Chaffetz, then Mr. Norlander, and Mr. Spencer. And it is a question from our audience. Mr. Chaffetz, do you support a timeline for bringing home our troops from Iran, or from Iraq and/or Afghanistan?
We're not there yet, but look, I want to bring our troops home, but I would not do it with an indiscriminate timetable. I really wouldn't. I am so proud of the men and women that are serving in our military, and quite frankly, I don't think President Bush has received enough credit for keeping this country safe. I recognize there are problems with some of the legislation and some of the overreaching things that I would have been very much against in terms of spying on Americans and torture and those types of things. But at the end of the day, it is no accident that we have remained free of a terrorist attack, and we might have the biggest one we've ever had, tonight. But if you look back from 2001, when we had 9/11, I am so proud of the men and women who have served. Let's also be honest about why we're still there. First of all, I think the president should have gone to Congress and got a declaration of war, that per the Constitution. That didn't happen. It should have happened. I want to maintain the president's ability and, I believe, responsibility to make sure that we still have first strike capabilities. But going to war requires going to Congress, and we haven't done that. We need to do that. Let's also understand why we're there, and it's in large part because of energy. It's something like 40% of the petroleum flows through the Strait of Hormuz, and we have an obligation to keep those shipping lanes open. That's why energy independence, and my call to become energy independence over the next 10 years, is not only an economic issue, but it's a national security issue. But I'm very, very proud of the troops.
Thank you. Mr. Norlander.
Ladies and gentlemen, since World War II, we have been fighting wars of containment, and we have been working under the United Nations Charter rather than the Constitution of the United States. Jason is right. We have not had any declarations of war since World War II. The thing that we need to understand is the United Nations Charter is not just a treaty. It's a constitution for world government, and it works on the premise that there is no creator. Now compare that to the divinely inspired Constitution written by men whom God raised up, and ask yourself the simple question, what Constitution is your party leadership following? Now, the point being is this. Had we followed the divinely inspired Constitution, we would not be in Iraq today or many other places around the world. The reason that we are in Iraq right now, and now the evidence is overwhelming, we went there for two reasons. To stabilize that section of the world, to have the Islamic nations come into the 21st century, and to secure the oil. But that is not what this nation is about. We are to promote liberty, not democracy. We are to lead by our example, not by our involvement. Our nation is not to use our military force to go around promoting the global community. What we have is worldwide socialism now, with America footing the bill. We can become energy self-reliant. There's no reason why we can't have that in less than 10 years. So we need to go back once again to the blueprint. We need to follow the Constitution of the United States, get out of the United Nations, and start taking care of ourselves and quit being the policeman for the entire world.
Thank you. Mr. Spencer, how do you feel about timelines for bringing troops home?
I support a timeline to come out of Iraq. General Petraeus said, I will not sit before you and tell you that we are safer because we went into Iraq. We have to support a timeline because right now we have three factions that are jockeying for power in Iraq. We have the Sunni, the Shiites, and the Kurds. And if we don't support a timeline and we don't get out of there, Iraqi will never be able to stand on their own. They have to do that. They cannot be a puppet of the United States. And that's very important to us. And one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I agree with both of these gentlemen, is that the energy, most of the oil wells are coming out of northern Iraq, which is Kurdish territory. Turkey believes they belong to them. So when we leave, I don't know what's going to happen with that. But also, you need to understand, this war is costing us $12 billion a month, and Iraq has $60 billion of oil revenue sitting in United States banks right now. And I think that there is a better way to contain that region with foreign policy and not military policy. But it's critical that we be aware that no matter what we do, we still have 3 more dangerous countries right now than Iraq. And I think that's Pakistan, Russia, and Iran. And, you know, I just think that we have got to pull back and refocus a foreign policy that has some kind of a global perception of how it's going to benefit our economy and our stabilization. We are more dangerous in Iraq the longer we stay there than by creating a timeline to pull out.
Thank you. This will go first to Mr. Nurlander. Earmarks are a common feature of congressional bills, and they're often used to get good things done in the country. So the question is, are you in favor of earmarking money for things like highway construction in Utah?
Well, first of all, earmarking is not used to do good things. It's done, if they were up front, they wouldn't have to be earmarked. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to the basics. The low standards that you see in America today, the out-of-control welfare state that this gentleman is talking about, that's what the earmarks are all about. The low standards, the out-of-control welfare state, the abortion issue, child abuse, pornography, same-sex marriage, illegal immigration, and now the creation of a new form of government, the North American Union. The plan is called SPP. And now the bailout of America. Those are all symptoms of a disease. The disease is socialism and its twin sister, communism. Now, socialism manifests itself in many ways, but primarily it begins when you remove responsibility and accountability from the lives of the citizens. The more a nation embraces socialism, the more secular and godless the nation becomes. What you are seeing with the earmarking and all these other issues are the results of 75 years of the New Deal, the New Frontier, and the Great Society. For years, the politicians have been promising with earmarks the American people great things at their own expense. In exchange for those promises, the politicians receive honor, prestige, and security in their present positions. No, I'm not for earmarking. I am for complete disclosure. And they are not being used for good purposes because since the New Deal, what we have been promoting is socialism.
Thank you.
Mr. Spencer.
The city of Los Angeles has 2.5 times more congressional representation than the state of Utah. I support earmarks. The way that Senator Bennett has been very successful for the state of Utah in achieving $71,000 for a law enforcement identification program for missing children, $1 million for a cancer center up at the Logan Hospital, $3 million for developing ejection seats at Hill Air Force Base. Those earmarks are good because a state as small as Utah would get nothing in this process, and they do go into the budget. The bridge to nowhere, I couldn't go along with that. They should be transparent, they should be public, and if the voters in the district don't like it, they can remove the congressman. But the small cities and towns need them, especially just to keep up with the growth and the infrastructure that's going on in this state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chaffetz.
I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that taught us that the decisions are best made at the localest of levels. And I do not believe that with 435 congressmen and 100 senators, that they know best how to dictate exactly where funds should go in each and every state. You can still get appropriations, the adequate, healthy appropriations that we need right here in Utah for our most vital projects without earmarks. You go through the normal, open, and transparent process of going through the committees and the subcommittees and hearings, and it's about openness and transparency. Last December, there was a $550 billion omnibus bill. It had 9,500 earmarks. Now, some of them were probably fairly laudable, but you had in there things like sand restoration on the beaches of Sarasota, Florida, bike paths in Minnesota, a post office museum in the state of Nevada, and even right here in Utah, where one of our congressmen asked for and got a $300,000 appropriation to fund a historical building, refurbish a historical building right here in Utah. It's not the role of the federal government to pay for those things. If we want those done, we should pay for those. Just like when they want to have it done in Sarasota, Florida, I don't want to pay to restore their sand, the sand on their beaches. The fundamental role of government has to change. We cannot be all things to all people, and we can't hand out millions of dollars. That's why we are now $500 billion in a deficit just this year alone. Just this year alone.
Thank you. And here's another of our series of questions from the audience. And I'm sure you and all the other people who are running this year all over the country have good intentions, but somehow those intentions seem to get lost when you get to when people get to D.C. How do you plan to stay connected? And we're going to start with Mr. Spencer, then Mr. Chaffetz, and then Mr. Norlander. How do you plan to stay connected with your constituents if you win, and how long do you plan to stay in office?
Well, I believe in term limits, and I'll make a commitment. Term limits right here tonight. I was on the Doug Wright show the other day, and he said 4 terms for a congressman, 2 terms for a senator. And, it really comes down to the fact that is probably the best way that you can look at the problems as Utah problems and American problems and not Democratic or Republican problems, is to be able to stand up and say, whatever I do, I'm going to do what's best for my district and not be afraid of offending someone. And so, I wouldn't want to be a congressman for the rest of my life. But the best way to stay connected to your district is to be able to be personally involved in the constituent service. And that sounds like a bureaucratic name, but you have people that work for a congressman that handle constituent problems. The congressman just doesn't need to have a glazed look when somebody says, hey, I want to thank you for solving that problem. You need to be involved with that problem, and you need to stay in touch with your district.
Thank you. Mr. Chaffetz.
I think on the surface, term limits sound good, but we already have a process in place. It's called the United States Constitution, where we revisit who represents us in Congress every 24 months. It's really not that long of time before the voters get to, again, decide. And I think I'm living proof that the process does work. I was outspent by $600,000, and yet was still able to claim victory to becoming the Republican nominee. And so the process does work. I think you stay grounded with your family. I have absolutely no intention of ever moving to Washington, D.C. I think the goal is to represent Utah to Washington, not Washington to Utah, and you do that best by living here and going to your church here and having your kids go to school here and understanding what's happening here in Utah. So that's my intention, and I stay grounded with my family first and foremost.
Thank you. Mr. Norlander.
I think I can stay connected by, let me explain to the audience my core beliefs. I believe this is a Christian nation. Patrick Henry said it cannot be emphasized too often or too strongly that this great nation was not established by religionists, but by Christians, not based upon a religion, but the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is my core belief. Unless you have an undaunted testimony of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, unless you understand the proper role of government in the tradition of the Founding Fathers, you cannot stay connected. Socialism, ladies and gentlemen, is not just a political ideology. It's evil. It destroys individuals, it destroys communities, and it is destroying this nation. We have got to go back to the blueprint. George Washington said, if we offer to our children, if we offer to the people what we ourselves disapprove, how can we afterwards defend our work? Let us raise a standard to which the wise and the honest can repair. The event is in the hand of God. What is that standard? It's the Holy Scriptures. It's the Declaration of Independence, where it states that this nation will be guided by the laws of nature and the laws of God, and the Constitution in the tradition of the Founding Fathers. This quote also suggests to the mind that good, wise, and honest people do not vote for the best bad choice. Pragmatism is one of Lucifer's greatest programs to deceive this nation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move to closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to give a closing statement, starting with Mr. Spencer.
Thank you. I want to thank my two opponents for being here, and I want to thank UVU for inviting Mr. Norlander. 30% of the people are undecided. I mean, the voters are undecided. They have no idea. They don't like the Republicans. They don't like their Democrats. They're just very mad, and they're very angry. It's very important that voters, they study the issues, they study the candidates, and they look for the person that can best represent them. And they ask tough questions, and that's very important. I probably talk to some 200 people a day on the phone, it seems like, and I just hear a lot of frustration and I hear a lot of anger out there. But the most important thing that we need to do is we need to go back and we need to stand up for our state and make sure that our values and our economy is protected from everything else that is going on. Now that almost sounds like impossible, but it can be done. And I think it's very important that you people that are here tonight, that you spread the word and you try to invite other people to get involved in this political process. This election is very important. And please do not go out there and vote straight party. Our troops in Iraq deserve better than that. They deserve you to study the issues. And if you think we need to stay in Iraq, then you vote that way. If you think we need to pull out, then you vote accordingly. But please, study the issues and get engaged in this process. Thank you.
My thanks again to UVU and to the Daily Herald and to all of you for participating in this process. Quite frankly, we need more people here and engaged in these and discussing these serious issues. The United States of America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. There could be nothing could make me more proud than being a United States citizen and running for the United States Congress. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that the very best hope for the United States of America, for our families and for our future, is to return to those core conservative Republican principles of fiscal discipline, limited government, accountability, and a strong national defense. That's the best hope for the United States of America, and that's what I will do as your representative in the United States Congress. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Spencer, I'd like to go back to something that you said, which I totally agree with. Would you and Jason be willing to have me from now on in the debates if this is what you truly... Is this all about political parties or is this about standing up for America?
I would love to have you in the debate.
Frank, thank you very much. Let the record show. Ladies and gentlemen, the commitment of the Founding Fathers is the calling of our day. It's now time to unite under the title of liberty, not as Democrats, Republicans, or whatever, but as Americans. I love this country, and I love it with all my heart. I can look at any piece of legislation and tell you within a few minutes, within 20 minutes, whether it's constitutional or not. I have prepared myself well for this effort. This is not just an intellectual exercise. I actually believe the doctrine. As your congressman, I will do everything I can. The word is not change. The word is restore. Restore the principles of the Founding Fathers. That is my commitment to you. Thank you very much.
All right, we still have a few minutes left, so let's have a little bit of fun. In a few sentences, we'll just go left to right, starting over here with Mr. Spencer. Handicap the presidential race for us.
Obama by 7 points.
How do you read the voters on this?
Well, one of the things the polls are not picking up is that I mean, just our involvement alone across the state. We've registered thousands of people that have given us a phone number, and the polls are not even picking them up. And I think at the end of the day, and you know, John McCain's he's a hero. He's a great guy. You know, I could live with that, not a problem. But I just think that people just want some. People are going to do something they've never done before in their life. I mean, they want some change. You know, if you were to handicap this race, I'd say Jim, because, I mean, people are just mad out there and they want something different. And so I just think it's going to be Obama by 7.
Great, thanks. Mr. Chaffetz, how do you read it?
I think John McCain will be the next president of the United States. I think at the end of the day, when we're electing a commander-in-chief, we're looking to somebody that we trust and that has good judgment. Judgment comes from experience. And of the people in this race, John McCain has that experience.
No, he doesn't.
He may win Barack Obama may win by 7 in New York, but I think overall we're looking at a McCain-Palin ticket. And let me also say something real quick. It is not the role of the United States Congressman to be a cheerleader for the president. We're supposed to be the watchdogs on the president, and I intend to live up to that obligation, no matter who's elected.
Mr. Nerlander.
What? First of all, let me tell you the number one question that's always asked of me, since we're going to have fun. People always say, what's the difference between you and Jason? Now, I hate to admit this, but he is much better looking than I am.
You're scaring me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think John McCain will be the next president. However, he's a globalist, and he will literally destroy the Republican Party. And you can write this down in your journals tonight. He will not close the borders. The North American Union, the plan called Security and Prosperity Partnership, has been signed on by Condoleezza Rice and other high-ranking officials in the Bush administration. The plan is to merge Mexico, Canada, and the United States economically, politically, and socially. They recognize if they can keep the borders open for another few years, it'll be enough to tip the scale to promote the North American Union. This is not just irresponsible, it's treason. And
Thank you. Well, we're out of time. Thank you for watching. This evening's debate will repeat here on UVU TV and also on demand on Comcast starting on Monday. You can also view highlights of this debate at heraldextra.com. Thank you for coming, and good night.
thank you very much. Thanks, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.